and he will be coming out to speak to you about what it's like being an Indigenous actor in the film industry and his experiences. So please join me in giving Gary Farmer a warm welcome.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here at the public library today. My name is Gary Farmer. Scanos, Wakwego, and Negaso Hayan to us. Yes, that's my language, Cayuga language. I was born in Oswego, Ontario, Canada, a long time ago, and I've been an actor for much of my life. I started in the 20s. And, I'm a lot older now, so hopefully a little wiser. Back when I started in the business, there were no Native writers, there were no Native directors, there were no Native actors for the most part, outside of Chief Dan George, who was an amazing guy. I had a chance to meet him and interviewed him for a TV show I was doing back in my 20s. He was an interesting guy. Spent most of his life as a hard laborer, in Vancouver. We're all several tribes there in the city of Vancouver, so they maintain a good cultural identity back in British Columbia. Of course, there's a lot of Native people in British Columbia generally. Also, Will Sampson was a big impact on me. He was out of Oklahoma, and they've given him some recognition now back at home. And I just finished working with his granddaughter. Worked on that last show called The Reservation Dogs. Reservation Dogs has really swept the nation. Really, probably the first popular series that we've ever had as Indigenous people. It was all created by the writers and the directors, and the show producers were all Native people from around the whole country, from different tribes all over. A lot of the actors were also, most of them were all Native American as well, from both Canada and the U.S. We even had, Hawaiians on the crew. And so it was a real Indigenous effort, that particular show, and it's had an amazing impact. And you can see the impact now with all the amount of content that's coming out. We'll be expecting a lot more. There's a whole force of young people that are behind me now. I felt alone. You might know the actor Graham Greene as well, who was nominated for Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in Dances with Wolves. He's from my community. We're actually cousins. We grew up across from each other as children, and it just happened that we both ended up being actors and ended up in the same rehearsal hall back in the 70s for a playwright out of the University of Western Ontario. I grew up stateside. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, Niagara Falls, New York. Most of my family were in the operating engineering business, building all the skyscrapers and such. Most of my relatives in my community were iron workers in the day during that industrial age. And all of my people were migrant workers, really, for America and Canada at so many levels. And it was amazing that I had the opportunity to kind of go beyond that, even though I started there as well with my father, being his engineer when, and a lot of my family built the Twin Towers and took it all apart when it fell down. So we've had an interesting relationship with the larger colonizer at large, I suppose, and it was a tough upbringing, I suppose. There was a lot of issues we faced as Indigenous people in this country when I was a child. And it had an impact on our kind of a generational impact on our people. And I could always sense that as a child. I think I really came out. I had a decent upbringing, learned a lot from my family. But I guess I think the impact too of reservation dogs, what it showed most was that our communities always kind of stuck together. We always had these urban social clubs. I'm sure there was one here in Dayton back in the day. I grew up not too far from here and used to travel through here. I currently live in New Mexico, so I come through Ohio a lot over the years. Coming from New Mexico, you can't really avoid Ohio unless you do go through Michigan to get back into Ontario. But having spent so much time in Niagara Falls and Buffalo, I love going through there. A lot of relations and families still in that region. And even talking with Stephanie, one of the main organizers, she also grew up in Buffalo, so there's a lot of relationship. It's nice to see that there's any recognition of Native America in Ohio. It was always fascinating to wonder, like, where did the Indigenous people go? I had to give a speech to Cincinnati a few years back, working with Irene Bedard, who also was a citizen here in Ohio and still is, I suppose, down in Yellow Spring, another actor like myself, Alaska-born, Alaska native, and we appeared together in Smoke Signals and stayed friends all those years. And she did a lot of work to help bring Native America back to Ohio. And I had to give a speech a few years back for the Cincinnati community, and I think they changed from Columbus Day to Native America Day, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a good recognition, so I started to do some research, and I found a professor at the University of Cincinnati. He was both an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and he found that there was this mound here in Ohio, about 20 miles northwest of Cincinnati. And those mounds were the same people that were here at 300 years ago at Contact. So that mound was 10,000 years old, And that always blew me away that my Indigenous people, and many of the same Cayuga, Seneca, Shawnee, Potawatomi, a lot of the tribes that are still here were there 10,000 years ago. And I knew my history that, when I used to go home between episodes of Res Dogs, and I would come up to Six Nations here, and I'm in Ontario, but that whole sweeping territory down the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi River, and all the way down into Oklahoma was classically Indigenous territory. I mean, it was the main trade routes for us for centuries of time before Contact. And, the seeds, especially, because I did a documentary film once called The Gift, which I invite you to see. It's a National Film Board out of Canada. But it was about where corn came from. And corn was classically a Mayan crop developed by the Mayan people from a grass. It was one of the few plants that needed that interaction between human and plant. And it was so prolific, right? I mean, before corn, there was rye or barley. I mean, you plant one seed, you get 6. And when you plant one seed of corn, you get potentially 270 seeds. So classically an indigenous crop, corn, revolution changed the economics of the world. It allowed European nations to enslave Africa. They didn't have a crop that could feed people over that long journey across the ocean. And so when you start looking at these histories and these relations between, indigenous people on this continent and in the future for the people here, especially, in the East as well as the West, I think it's vital that we start to recognize, and there's such a valuable insights in Indigenous history that could really lead us forward. So much so that, as a young actor, I not only acted, uh, I was based pretty well in Toronto, Ontario. That's where I spent many years in the theater. That's how you nurture performance, is working in the theater, working with playwrights. It's really a writer's medium. And you're allowed to speak more truth than you are able to in TV and film, because there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of censorship that goes on with what you see on television. Uh, that's what's such the breakthrough now for television, is the fact that there's streaming, which allows the writer not to face so much censorship as we have in the past 100 years. But it's modern television and the streaming has allowed more truth to come forward in terms of the relationships that have existed on this continent for so long. Um, I had an amazing career as a young actor. It gave me a lot of opportunities that I took advantage of, and had a great time doing. It always amazes me now that I get so much recognition when I lived without much recognition as being the only Native American kind of in the business outside of Graham and other people like myself, Tantu Cardinal, and others like us that led this whole new wave of talent that's coming forward now. But the exciting thing is that you'll see a lot more content coming from Native America than you ever have in your lifetime up until now. They're really taking the bull by the horn. One of the things I was always fascinated to do, was much easier to do in Canada than the United States, was I started my idea was that radio was the most honest medium, right? Because at the sound of my voice, you create images in your own imagination as to what I'm speaking. And with television, television puts your mind into beta, which allows, basically you're watching, if you watch 5 hours a day of television, you're going to watch 60,000 commercials a year, which kind of outlines how you should live your life in terms of your spending and such. And it's much more of a brain control mechanism with television, especially in the early days. And you can see, even the impact of Fox News and how it kind of corrupted what's truth and what isn't truth, and everyone's opinions on how to save America from the encroachment of people of color, the BIPOC communities growing, exponentially, and it has a lot of people in fear. So that's what the politics of the nation is right now, is living under all this fear of that something's going to change us inside out. And yet, I think if we just give way to that acceptance of this change and the growth of this nation, that we can begin to look at peaceful means, which my people is based on peace. The Haudenosaunee, the Confederacy of the Six Nations, was five warring nations: the Onondagas, the Cayugas, Senecas, Mohawks, and Seneca were all at war with each other back 1100s. Is when the Great Law was created in the 11th century. And contrary to popular stories that we were at peace with each other, at contact. There's stories that we were all warring with each other, but there were different confederacies throughout this whole continent. The Blackfoot Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Society with the Dawa, the Potawatomi, and the Anishinaabe were all at peace. And there was different wampum that was exchanged between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, my folks. to live together and to work together and stuff. So peace was widespread at contact. And so, what unbalanced the peace for us in the beginning was, basically the first contact with alcohol, right, which happened up in the St. Lawrence River uh, back around the 1500s. Of course, that first impact, it unbalanced the society up there. And all these stories that the Haudenosaunee went up there and wiped that out was them just trying to stop the impact of this bad medicine. And we've been fighting the bad medicine ever since. Alcohol has had a profound effect, not only on my people, but the general population. And still, much of our economies are based after alcohol proliferation in the continent. So um, it's been an amazing journey for me to kind of pick up on people's stories and translate them to film or TV. I've taken it very seriously in my whole life because it's been my way to, I never thought I could make a living doing this, but it's been a wonderful journey for me. And it's taught me so much about so many other cultures, so many other Indigenous people worldwide. And, because Indigenous people exist around the world. And I know there's a lot of war still going on in various places today that's causing us a lot of pain and suffering. And I just hope that we can learn to give way to Native America more in the United States and here in Ohio. And it'd be nice to get some tribes recognized here in this state, for their long time existence. I just finished talking at Penn State University, another state that there's no reservations in Pennsylvania. It's hard to believe, that didn't exist or that the people weren't there. My own people were there. Cayugas and Senecas lived fluently through Pennsylvania, but there's still no state recognition there, at least acceptance of the history. So I guess that's my goal. Still looking for America to kind of grow up about Native America and really open their hearts and minds to the possibilities of learning some of what we shared and how we existed and lived cooperatively, and how agronomy really kind of changed, our way of life, because we all grew food. And now my efforts are going to different things. Like I'm big with the hemp industry right now, because I believe that hemp, which is an ancient plant, 5,000 years of existence, it's gotten corrupted with its sister, which is cannabis, which people, you can see, everything's changing around cannabis, but there's so many beneficial things for health of CBD, and I know a lot of you are probably using what you can with your aches and pains and arthritis and such, and just what it's able to do with children and some of the childhood diseases we're facing. It's really a strong plant, and I can't help but realize that the plant had a bad public relations job done to it about 85 years ago, and you realize who was doing that work to kind of undermine that plant of power was basically the liquor industry, the pulp and paper industry, uh, the pharmaceutical industry, the oil and gas industry. I mean, everything that controls our economy now has been under attack for the last 85 years because they knew that this plant had more power than all of that, and we can replace the plastics industry with the hemp industry. It's really amazing, and you can see the plastic is doing the harm, and it's classically an oil and gas operation that they keep exploiting, and it keeps damaging land and creating a lot of corruption. And so as time goes on, I think we can really start to change the economy of the world and start making it more for the people and less for the corporations. But it's a tough fight, it's going to be a long struggle to open people's minds and realities to the new world and all the possibilities for our young. To me, hemp is the answer to the seventh generation. We can build cars from hemp. In fact, Ford built his first car here in Ohio out of hemp. It's stronger than steel, stronger than fiberglass. And we don't have to dig up lithium to make batteries for phones. Hemp can make batteries as well, as good as lithium. So there's so much more knowledge we need to attain. And I just hope that we can work with the indigenous communities more and more, and that they give us more creativity options. And there's a lot of new series coming out. I'm just going to watch next week a new series called Echo, which features most of our creative community as actors. A lot of the young ones, some of the older ones like Graham and Tantu are involved in that project, and there's so much more to look for. I operate and help to work at Santa Fe International Film Festival in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I currently live. I like New Mexico because if you think of it, the Pueblos were never moved, were never relocated. And all of their ceremonial life is still intact. And I feel safe there. The weather's good there. I live at 8,000 feet, which is challenging at my age, but I just always felt so safe in New Mexico. And you think about all the storms the South faces, and we think about the Trail of Tears, when you chase your indigenous people off, or you relocate them, or you push them off. And Trail of Tears was a tragic story, and we'll probably learn more about that in history films. But once you take those ceremonial people away from the land, then those ceremonies aren't being conducted. And most of our ceremonial life as indigenous people is all about protecting nature and having respect and asking for the rain when we need it, to have the food that nourishes us. Because as indigenous people, I've learned the only thing that really matters is the food that nourishes you, the clothing to keep you warm, and some housing of some kind to keep you from the weather. But the gift of creation is really the child. And I feel like with this society, we've become so enamored with the economics of life and the prosperity and all the things that we don't necessarily need become priority, and all the posers. It seems like a lot of posing to show and build huge houses when they're just using resources from our future generations. So that's been my message, I guess, as the actor. I'm always looking for material that speaks to these larger issues, with us all living together in the same place for centuries of time, and how we're going to continue on, because that's our story. Human existence was meant to be forever. It didn't have an end, much like the Bible has an ending. Ours was to go forever. And I hope you can break through in this state, in this city, and recognize indigenous people. And I think that'd be the first step to moving forward, to working together to find some positive answers to all the issues we face as human beings on this planet today. For some of the young people that are interested in acting, I'll probably speak more about that tomorrow with tomorrow's festivities, and talk about the process of taking material and reaching the big screen or the small stage, or the value of storytelling in any community. Whether you become, I don't consider myself a major player, but I've always been the working actor. And I got into it because I wanted to make an impact. I found out early in life that if I can make people laugh, or if I can make them cry, I can make them think. And that's what I want. I want critical thinking human beings, making decisions based on observation over centuries of time, I don't want people making decisions and that's why I became an actor. I really wanted to make change. And I could see it in my own upbringing that things weren't right, that people weren't happy with their slot in life. And I just wanted to make that effort. And after 50 years of doing this, I'm starting to slowly see the impact I've and many others have had. So it's a really special time for me at my age, still able to do some work. There's a crazy show on right now that I'm involved with. It's with Emma Stone, called The Curse. We all shot it in Espanola, New Mexico, which is a very impoverished community. It's really interesting to work with creatives like that and help tell a story of a rural part of the world. Uh, much of material is about the affluent, and it's nice to see when material is about the other side of life. The people that aren't so successful and how they manage to weave their way through prosperity and finding enough food to get on the table. So it's an interesting series. Interesting to see Emma kind of turn her, story power toward us in central New Mexico, a very traditional community of Hispanic, non-native and native people, conquistador culture. Another point of, you know, insurrection of colonialism. Virginia, Santa Fe, and Quebec City, the three impacts of colonization on the continent, the French, the English, and the Spanish. And we've all cooperated together to kind of move forward. So it's an exciting time for me as a creative working in this industry. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for the organizers having me here in Ohio, here in Dayton, Ohio. There's a plug for a great comedian friend who is from here. She's in the series Rutherford Falls, and I just had her name and I forgot it again. But she's a a local here in Dayton, Ohio, and she's a real powerhouse comedian who's doing the touring. I think she just played here recently. But it's the performing family is a big family. It's not that big really, and we're all aware of what everyone's doing. Another interesting series to watch is um, the English with Emily Blunt. It's on Amazon. I think it's a 6-part series. It kind of tells about the formation of the country and how the fight for land, the fight for some kind of economic solitude for the people who apparently founded the country, but it's a good look at history from a different point of view than you might see normally. So I'd like to promote that series as well as the English. And finally, I'm involved with an interesting series called Resident Alien. It's a sci-fi series that I play Dan 12 Trees, the father to the second lead, my stepdaughter. And I don't know, it's if you're interested in alien culture and what aliens might do with the planet, but it has such a wonderful sense of humor, and our leading actor is such a comedic powerhouse. It's worth a look at, Resident Alien. And of course, those that haven't seen Reservation Dogs, it's widely available on Hulu, another streaming service, and all 3 seasons or all 30 episodes are up there for you to be entertained by and informed. Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to carry on with anything that way, that you have questions specifically about anything. I'd be happy to give it a shot at an answer for you. Yes?
Was there ever a piece of content in the movie or that you did that got cut for time or whatever reason that you there?
In some of my work?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I guess I learned pretty young that I have a lot of power as an actor once I'm on screen, once we start to shoot, and they've committed to me as the performer. And Yeah, there was a lot of times where most of the time I didn't have native producers, native writers, native directors behind me. So I felt the weight in the old days. I used to say it's 10 times harder for me to play a Native American on screen because I have to fight for everything. And a lot of times over the course of my history as a performer that I had to fight what I knew was not true. I had to fight for what I know is true. And yeah, there's several occasions, especially working with mainstream television, even something as powerful as, um, I'm not good with titles, but I performed a lot with a lot of early American television, and often I had to kind of correct them or stand up for things I thought were right. And, at times I had to abuse the power by saying, well, if you're not going to listen to me, then I'm not carrying on. I'm done. Right. So I had to put myself on the line a lot. I got that kind of nature. Growing up in the West Side, I wasn't the quiet res Indian. I think people often expect us to be, kind of the quiet one in the room, sitting in the back. I sat in the back of the bus, but I was pretty outspoken my whole career. Continue to be so, but it's a lot easier now with my own people in the creative positions they are now. Now it's kind of fun. But it was challenging to work outside my community when the story was reflective of my people. And I consider Indigenous America and Canada my people. I've had to learn several of their languages, phonetically, of course, but I hold that truth to heart. I really do. Because Indigenous languages, if you think about it, are the true study of nature based on observation over centuries of time. To me, every American person should be wanting to hold on to that knowledge. It really is. It tells us how to survive on this planet forever, those languages. And it's a shame that a lot of them are dying. And it takes a lot of advocacy on our part to keep our own languages alive, even mine, which is doing fine now. The Cayuga language and the Mohawk language, the Onondaga language, the Tuscarora language is in big trouble. There's not a lot of Tuscarora speakers left, so there's a lot of work in our communities to try and maintain these languages, which I think are integral to all human survival on the planet. So certainly encourage you all to learn more about that. Good question. Anyone else want to give it a shot? Yes.
It's not really a question,
Yeah.
but can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, my voice is soft, sorry. I just want to say thank you because when I saw your movie Powwow Highway, it changed the whole course of my life. I had an experience where I was watching it on DVD, and right after Filbert had the coyote scene, I went outside and kind of went head to head with a fox, and it just changed my whole life. So I just want to say thank you for making that film and the other films that you've made.
I got to tell you that film, she's mentioning Powwow Highway and Filbert's relationship with the animal world some. And that film changed my life too, because I'm an Eastern Great Lakes Indian, grew up in Buffalo of all places, and Six Nations communities in Ontario, but we don't have. It's a different culture. Northern Cheyenne culture is in Montana. It's a real medicine wheel culture. It's a lot of the traditional stories are very unique to Cheyenne, and for me to be exposed to that as a young person, it really opened my eyes too. It really, in fact, I was doing Guys and Dolls in Montreal when I got that job. And surrounded by beautiful chorus girls every day and having the time of my life when, I had done the audition and then I was offered the role, and I only had to open Guys and Dolls in Montreal, which one of my favorite cities in the world, and rushing off to, the middle of nowhere in my Montana and attaching myself to this character, Filbert Bonham, it really did change my life and made me so much more aware of. And I luckily had Jimmy Red Cloud, who I credited in the film for all the knowledge. I just had skill enough to bring what I was learning from Jimmy and share it on film. And that's simply the ability of a good actor, I think, is to be able to do that, literally channeling what I was learning at the moment. And yeah, that film's, if you haven't seen it,
Is Power Highway on one of the streaming services?
no, it's
I had a
gotten,
DVD and I accidentally damaged it before I could see it. I'm hoping it was on.
well, you're fortunate enough that I don't tell anyone, but since George died, the Beatle, George Harrison, produced the film. Yeah, he had a small film company at the time. In fact, if you look at the history of George's, I forget the name of the company now, but he made some great films. Any other questions? Yes.
I enjoyed Reservation Dogs so much, and the young actors. I was just curious, is there going to be any sort of projects based on some of the stories that show? Is there like maybe evolving into more?
Well, you figure that the creators, there was probably about 15 native writers on that series. All of those writers have worked within other shows that I've done. Like one of those writers, Tommy Pico, out of a tribe in Southern California. He writes for us on Resident Alien. 15 writers, I suppose, maybe at least a dozen of them write for other television shows. And we probably had about 15 different native directors. They've all got projects. I mean, what you should have is a film festival here in Dayton that showcases, because some of the best movies are out there right now, like Fried Red Face of Me, directed by a Navajo Hopi director, popular film, plays a lot of festivals around. You should have a run here. Fancy Dance, young Erica Tremblay grew up in Oklahoma, is from my community, originally Cayuga. We speak Cayuga. She came to my community and studied the language for 3 years, Cayuga language. We have full immersion in our community for our children now. And she came and studied as an adult that language, and then immediately made a film called Fancy Dance. It's got about 20% Cayuga language in that film, or Gayokono is the word for us. It's worth a look at. That film is really good, and especially on how it deals with the murdered missing women subject as well. So there's some really popular cinema out there right now being made by Native people, which isn't necessarily getting the mainstream audiences yet. We need a little film festival here in Dayton. I'm sure you have one, but maybe we can impact it more with Native content that's available. And that's just a couple of titles. There's at least 10, 12, 15 films. The young guy who was in, I don't know how many saw Smoke Signals. Maybe you see that film? You remember the little guy who played my son? He was only 9 years old at the time. His name is Cody Lightning. The Lightnings are from Alberta, and Mom shifted them down to Los Angeles when they were all kids. And both the youngest and the oldest, this middle girl, are fine actors. And Cody had this joke going around because that was the height of his career when he was 9 years old. And he's 44 now, so he does a mockumentary about trying to get us all back together to make Smoke Signals 2 so he can pick up on his career after some 35 years. It's an amazing, funny film. It's called Hey Victor, and you can find it somewhere. Eventually they'll get picked up by streaming. I know Netflix just picked up Fried Red Face of Me, but something like Fancy Dance hasn't gotten a distribution yet, so it's hard for you to find it as audience, unless that's the value of a film festival here in the village, and we can start to expose people to content that you might not normally see on television or streaming. There we go, one more question.
Hi, I want to say thank you for coming out today. You do get to work with a wide variety of cast, but
Yeah.
when you're working with younger Indigenous people, what do you want to like impart to them when they're just starting on their young journey and you've had such a long career? What do you impart to them?
I try to be just sincere with them. I try to be on my game more than ever, because it takes a certain amount of discipline and study. So you want to come prepared. You want to come with positive choices as actors. If you're making negative choices all the time, just like his friends, you got a friend keeps making negative choices, you might not want to hang around him so much, right? I mean, you might back off some. So that's how I try to come in, just fully prepared and do the best possible job, and and maintain a certain amount of respect for everybody on the set. Not trying to diss anybody or anything, but just be there for people. And that's simple as that. I try to set an example, I guess. I don't, if they come to me with questions, I'm more than happy to spend any amount of time with them. And I've taught a lot of young actors. I'm a little harder than most teachers, I suppose. So I'm not necessarily a popular actor teacher, but I learned a methodology for myself that works. But really, just coming in prepared and having made choices before I get to the director, give him an idea of what I think should happen, and then let him shape me and have the ability to listen, because half of acting is listening. And most of us probably aren't good listeners. A lot of us aren't. That's one of the hardest things. It's one thing to regurgitate your lines. It's another thing to listen to what the other actor's saying to you and letting it make sense so that you can respond in the scene. So it's very vital to learn how to listen. So, but yeah, I'm happy to share with all those young actors. But I guess the talent I felt with Res Dogs, they were all on their game though. But you can see Bear, the number one character. You can see, I think, over the course of 3 seasons, you can just see before your very eyes he's becoming a better actor. So that it's just practices by doing, having the opportunity is half the battle. Yeah. Right, everybody. We're going to have a meal shortly, prepared by our wonderful hosts here today. I hope you can all join us and we'll feast together one time before the evening's out. Thank you so much, everyone.
So please give Gary a round of applause, thanking him for coming all the way from New Mexico. And I also want to give a round of applause to Autumn Lee for coordinating Gary coming out. Gary is her tribal uncle and a close family member, and Autumn's just an amazing singer, and she has sung many times since she was younger with Gary Farmer and the Troublemakers. We have community partners, get your blood checked before you leave with Premier Health and a bunch of other agencies. And some of the topics that Gary discussed are also available just for you to look at and learn throughout the atrium. So we have the Murdered Missing Indigenous Corner, the Advocacy Corner, with also the residential school program, or Survivor Skirt, with the books from the library. And on this side, you'll see more of the contemporary ribbon skirts. And one of the ribbon skirts was by a Tuscarora designer. And we just got that at Seneca Casino. They had their first inaugural show. And then the red ribbon skirt is from Jillian Waterman. So take a look at those, and we invite you to join us tomorrow for our full programming. We're going to have a full day of children's programming as well, done by Janet and Megan Oliver, so raise your hands. They're going to be doing, thank you for joining us. Megan is going to be doing the basket dance. Also for the children's program, we're going to be doing baby corns, and each of them will get a shield. So if you see some of us have our clan shields on, they're going to get their own family shield to make. And each station has a little reach symbol on it, and the kids can go around and ask questions and earn a ribbon. So by the end, they'll have their own shield hanging with lots of ribbons and an opportunity to learn from the different stations. So thank you for joining us.